someone once asked me, hey, do you want to go to hell? Get married. They weren't done. They said, do you want to go to a deeper part of hell? Have kids. And to me, this was not an uncommon thought. Many people think that marriage is the end of your life. You know, they see these young couples now with a shirt, and it says on one side, it says, it has a ball and chain on the guy, and it has him getting married. And then on the other side, it just says game over, and he's like, married. I don't know why our country says, that marriage is a bad thing, that your life's over, and all that sort of thing, but that's the picture that they paint, isn't it? And I asked one lady once, who I knew well, if she loved her husband. She got very angry at me and told me not to ask something so personal. I guess she answered my question. I asked another lady. I only asked because I was so scarred by my parents' relationship and all the marriages that I saw that were so broken. I was wondering if there was even such a thing as love anymore, a successful relationship. So I started asking people. And the second lady I asked, do you love your husband? And she said, Brian, I love my husband more and more every single day. This lady was in her 50s, and she meant it. She has one of the best marriages that I know of. And I thought, wow, it's possible. Rare, but possible to have a good marriage. So it wasn't hopeless for me to get married, and it wasn't hopeless for me to find love. I just needed to know how to do that. And that's when I started reading books and studying it. And I'm kind of one of these analytical people that watches everyone else mess up, and I learn from their mistakes. So I'm also going to be pulling tonight from a lot of the experts. Pope John Paul II, who's an expert on sexuality and relationships. Dr. Clouden Townsend, who wrote the best book on dating and relationships that I can recommend. It's called Boundaries in Dating. And it's not about don't do this, don't do that. It's about pitfalls that all people fall into that actually destroy relationships. And if you can avoid these, you'll be on your road to happily ever after. Some of those I'll be covering tonight. I also will be covering Gregory Popchak, who has a book over there called, not for sale, don't buy it. It's called For Better Forever, A Catholic Guide to Lifelong Marriage. And he said he talks about this exceptional 7% of married people and what makes them exceptional. How come they have such fantastic marriages? So he goes through the pathway of love all the way from the beginning to the end and tells you how you can have this. And so it's a really good read, and I recommend it even if you're not married to read it in preparation for marriage. So, before I get going down the pathway to love, which is the name of my talk tonight, I want to start at the beginning, at the doorway of the pathway. And there's a couple of things loose ends we need to tie up. All Catholics, all people in general, really need a strong foundation. One of the foundations is knowing who we are and loving ourselves. This is the hard part, right? We all have, at some point in our life, the disillusionment that if I just find love, I'll be happy. If I just get married, I'll be happy. If I get married, I won't be lonely. But that's not true. I'm sorry. You will be lonely in marriage. Everyone gets lonely in marriage, no matter how good of a marriage you have. I haven't got lonely yet, but I know someday I will. Why? Because it's a reminder that only God fulfills our hearts perfectly. Nothing on earth is going to make us happy perfectly. And anytime we try to make God, a person our God, it always fails. So we need to love ourselves first. We need to beat ourselves, be strong, and love who we are. That's the oxymoron of love. We've all seen people who are so desperate for love, who need love, need love, need love, and if they can find it for themselves, they'll just be happy. Because they think that love is something they receive, but it's not, is it? Love is something that you give. Love is selfless. You give love, you don't take it. You do, but you got to give it to get it, in a sense. Love is reciprocal in nature. So the more people, they're desperate to receive it, the more difficult it's going to be to find it. I want you to think about Theology of the Body for a second. That's a book I've recommended over there too. Pope John Paul II says, that everything in creation represents God. Everything in creation tells us something about God, reveals something about who He is. So if you look at a beautiful, person, a beautiful flower, a gorgeous sunset on the mountain overlooking, the Swiss Alps or something, and you just say, wow, that's so beautiful. That is, in a little way, supposed to reveal to us how beautiful God is. That's supposed to show us something of who God is, His beauty. I once saw 5 lightnings come together once and just come straight down and blow up a forest. And while everyone was running for their life, all I could say was like, wow, God, you're even more powerful than that. And I remember that showed me something to how powerful God was. God, how strong God was. If you look at the human eyeball, a spider web, a DNA strand, you'll see something of how complex God is, how intricate He is. If you look at the gravity or wind, it's invisible, and yet it's real. It kind of is another piece of who God is. He's a mystery. He's invisible, but yet He's there. If you ever tried to touch the wind, you can't do it. But yet if it blows strong enough, it can touch you and pick you up and throw you. It's weird. It's a mystery, which shows another part of who God is. But what is God in His essence? Who is God at His core? The Bible says that God is love. God is love. And Pope John Paul says, what is the only thing on this earth, what is the only thing in the universe that can show who God is in His essence? The only thing is the human body. Only humans are capable of showing who God is in His essence. Yes, you can see little bits of beauty, power, complexity, mystery, but love, who God is, only we can show that, and we show it with our bodies. The Pope says only we have the capability of making the invisible visible to others. Think about that for a second. Every time you listen to someone who has a problem, you're using your body, your ears, your arm that you warm their back. Every time you help an old lady across the street, you're using your body. Every time you give someone advice, you're using your body. We are showing God to others every time we show love. That is cool. Now, a lot of people in the world, as we know, speak lies with their body, and they hurt others. But if done right, we can actually show God to others and experience God through others. That's the way God meant it to be. So we need to think about that and be like, wow, I'm actually, a little bit more awesome than I think I am, I have a little bit more worth. Pope John Paul puts it this way. He says, man is distinguished, quote, from even the most advanced animal because he has an inner self, which is characteristic only to persons. An inner life means a spiritual life, and it revolves around truth and goodness. So humans have an interior life, an interior spirituality that, unlike animals or anything else in the universe, makes us capable of love. True love. And that's fantastic. We are the only ones who are unique in the sense that God only made you. And you, and you. He only made us the way He made us. You're the only ones with your smile. You're the only ones with your eyes, your hugs, your sense of humor. You are you. And God made you and me, for a reason, and put us here at this point in this time in history to change the world around us. We, as humans, are the only thing capable of perfection. Nothing else can become perfect. But by the time we get to heaven, we're going to be perfect. We're going to shine brighter than all the glorious heavens that there are. We are sons and daughters of God. We are princes and princesses of the future heavenly kingdom. Every woman here is a princess of the Most High God. If you were in England, the Queen of England, King of England would be your parents, and you'd be like, wow, I love you. But you guys are queens and princesses of heaven. And all the men here are princes of heaven. Now we need to act like we're princes and princesses of heaven. And we need not to date or entertain anyone who won't treat us like a prince or princess of the Most High God. This, people are like, what does this have to do with anything, Brian? Get to the love part. This is the foundation, the indispensable foundation of love. Pope John Paul says you need to understand the value of a person because in this, he says, is the foundation of all love. When you can see how valuable a person is, and then you treat him or her like they are worth more than anything in the universe, you have the foundation of love. You won't use them. sexually or otherwise. You will treat them as they deserve to be treated. And that's a beautiful thing. That's something that we could spend the next 2 years thinking about and not fully grasp. But, I bring it up here tonight. And I recorded my CD of this talk ahead of time, so a few of you can get it and listen to it over and over, because I'm going to pack a lot into this talk. And if you don't get a copy, then email me and, we'll talk. So we need to know that the value of a human being. Because what is love? It's seeing the value in the other person and choosing to love them, to do what's good for them, whether you feel like it or not. Love is choosing the good of the other person, to do what's good for them. Not for yourself necessarily, but for them and for their soul. In fact, Pope John Paul says the more responsibility you feel for the other person, for their mind, for their heart, for their soul, the more true love there is. The more responsibility you feel for another person, the more true love there is. So true love is free from selfishness. True love seeks to give to the other person, but not to a fault. I know way too many, sorry ladies, I'm going to pick on you for a second, but I know too many ladies, and this is only because you have beautiful hearts. You guys have such beautiful hearts that give, but sometimes you give too much, and your hearts get broken in the process. You try to love someone who isn't capable of loving you in return. And sometimes even maybe want to fix them, and you just make them better in the process, but no, you get hurt in the process. There's reciprocal nature of love. You have to give and receive. If you're giving, and convincing yourself that they love you, even though they're not giving anything back, then you're only lying to yourself and to them. It's not love. Even if it feels like love, even if you say, I love you, it's not. Because love is reciprocal in nature. So that's the truth of it. The other foundation that I want to talk about is truth. Now, obviously, we know that. You're probably saying, duh. But we all need to tell the truth in our relationships. And if someone's not truthful in our relationship and they're actually lying to us, then that's a serious character flaw. And we really don't want to be with that person unless they're say they're going to change and actually do it. But we can be deceptive in other ways. I used to go out with people and they were really nice looking, and I was like, wow, this girl's really nice looking, and then all of a sudden we're having a great time, and then she drops the bomb. Oh, she just brings it out of the blue. Man, I really hate the Catholic faith. That doesn't even mean we haven't even talked about it out of the blue, but she'll be like, I'm just not religious, especially the Catholic Church. They think they own the world and all this stuff, and, in my heart I'm like, oh man, I'm Catholic. Oh, this was a perfect relationship. On the outside I'm like, yeah, I know I know what you mean. It's like, I didn't have a backbone to say what I felt. And so that was my problem. We have to remember that dating is a mature relationship, and you need a backbone. You need to be able to say what you like and what you don't like without fear of being dumped, or without fear of the person not liking you. If they're too immature to understand that, well, then that's their immaturity. But I've heard of too many people who get asked out on a date and be like, oh, do you want to go out on Chinese food? And inside they're like, oh, I hate Chinese food. Sure, I love Chinese food. When, in fact, the more mature response would be, well, I don't really like Chinese food too much, but do you like Italian? And they'd be like, sure, Italian's fine, or whatever else. But the fact is, we need to be honest. Because if we're not honest in relationships, then it's not going to work. Because truth is love, and love is truth. And we don't want to be on the other side of that. So, the pathway of love.